iPadOS 16 is here, and I'm going to cover everything that's new in it. This video is sponsored by PDF Expert. Let's get into it. Stage Manager is the big new feature of iPadOS 16. This brings windowing of apps to the iPad. When originally announced back in June at WWDC, it was going to be limited to the iPads with the M series chips. It has since been expanded to also support the 2018 and the 2020 iPad Pros. This is fantastic to see since those iPads are still used by so many people. By default, Stage Manager isn't on. You have to go into Control Center and enable it. If you have one of the supported iPads and don't see this option, go into Settings, Control Center, and add it to the list. Since Stage Manager is optional, that does mean you can still use the old split view method, but you will be giving up a lot if you decide to do this. The big benefit of Stage Manager is you can now have up to 4 apps open on an iPad at once. This also includes the ability to have multiple windows of the same app open as well. So I can have LumaFusion, Lightroom, and 2 files windows open on my iPad at the same time now. Once you have Stage Manager activated, when you open an app, it will now be in a window mode. When using the iPad in tablet mode, you can resize the windows by dragging the corner icon at the bottom. This icon will shift sides depending on which way the window is able to expand. If you have a mouse or trackpad paired with the iPad, you can grab any corner or side and drag the window to resize it. With a cursor, you have more fine control than a meaty finger, so I get the expanded nature of this. You can drag an app to be a traditional full-screen iPad app if you wish. Personally, I like to leave the windows just above the dock so that the dock stays visible, but for playing video, making an app full screen makes sense. You can grab the top bar of an app and move it around on your screen just like on the Mac. When moving and resizing windows, they snap to a grid. Apps can go from full screen to fairly small. This uses different size classes built into the app so it can scale down to the smallest iPhone version. This means apps are resizable but have predefined points. When moving an app around on screen, you have to have more than one app open to do so. If you just have one app up, it will stay in the center no matter how small you make it. Once you add at least a second app, you can move each of those windows around your display. They are, however, on a grid system. There are predefined points where apps can be placed in iPadOS. When you start a move of an app and drop it, it will then snap to the nearest position. If you are moving an app that will cover another app behind it, it will then shift the app behind it slightly out of the way, so you'll see the window of the app in the background pop out a bit. This is so that you can easily tap or click on the background app to get to it. But where this gets really weird is if you have a bigger window in the background and a smaller window in the foreground. You can then move the smaller app to any position. There is no grid at this point, but only horizontally, not vertically. I know, I said what as well. That means there is code for freely movable windows, but for some reason Apple chose to limit its functionality. This whole grid and resizing system is very confusing. It's making a problem out of something that was already solved. At first I thought maybe they can't do free-flowing windows because of the way iPad apps are designed and it would cause every developer to redesign their app. Then I remembered we have iPad and iPhone apps running on the Mac already via Catalyst. They can be freely resized and moved around to wherever we want. I have a long list of items I would like to see changed in the next version of Stage Manager, and the grid and resize options are at the top. On the left side of the display is the Recent section, a collection of apps you have previously used. These are your 4 previously used stages. When apps are paired together on screen, they make up a stage. You can tap on these to jump between the different stages. 3-finger swiping on a trackpad moves you between stages. Also, swiping along the bottom edge of the iPad will move you between stages. If you tap on an app from your dock or app library that is already in a stage, the OS will then jump to it. If the app isn't in a stage, it will open into a new one. There are a few ways to add an app to a pre-existing stage. It's still very similar to Split View in the fact that you can drag and drop an app from the dock, Spotlight, or the app library to add it to a stage. There's also the multitasking buttons. Now these have slightly changed from Split View. Full screen will make an app full screen. Add another window moves all of the apps that are in that stage out of the way. You can then pick from the dock or from all your recent apps. When you pick an app, it will then add it to your current stage. The other option is minimize. This takes that window out of the stage and moves it to a separate stage in the background. The final option is close. This completely closes the app from the stage and the background. In the past, I would never completely close an app, but this helps keep the recent area organized. You can also drag and drop apps out of the recent section and add that window to the current stage. The Show All Window feature has been redesigned. The shelf is gone. You can still long press on an app and select the Show All Windows feature. Or if the app is the current active app and you tap on the icon, it will pull up this feature. When in the Show All Windows mode, you can tap the plus button to create a new window. You can also get this mode from the recent section of Stage Manager. Just tap or click any app icon and you'll see all the windows for that app. You can then drag and drop it into the current stage. I wish there was a setting for Stage Manager that would change the behavior of when you tap on an app icon. Right now, if you just tap or click an app, it opens a new stage or jumps to the stage that it's in. This creates so many different stages. And the animation reminds me of Minority Report. It's just too much. No matter what, you have to do some form of dragging and dropping just to have two apps in the same stage. What's weird, just like with the grid positioning, there's one exception to this. You can shift-click an app in the recent section and it will add that app to the current stage. This only works from the recent section. It does not work from the dock or Spotlight. Just adding this feature to the dock and Spotlight would go a long way to improving Stage Manager interactions. Like I mentioned, you can have up to 4 apps in a stage now. Once you add a 5th app though, the app that has been used last gets kicked out and put into its own stage. This also includes creating windows as well. So if I have 4 apps open in a space and start a new email message or a tweet in the app Spring, it will then kick out the app that hasn't been used most recently. While I kinda understand the 4 window app limit on the iPad, it's a small canvas and it can get messy quickly, but kicking out a full-fledged app because I opened another window is a weird choice. Those separate windows can't be using that much power. We also know the M series iPads will be able to run up to 8 apps at once when plugged into an external monitor, so the iPad can definitely handle the extra windows. Most of the time 4 apps is fine for what I need, but every once in a while a 5th or even 6th app would be nice. I really dislike artificial limitations when it comes to computers. Let me decide what works for me. There are a couple of configuration options for Stage Manager. If you go into Control Center and long press on the Stage Manager icon, you can set the recent section or the dock to auto hide. If you choose to hide one or both of these, you can swipe in from their given side or push the cursor into where they should be to reveal them. Stage Manager is so heavily based on drag and drop, my personal preference is to leave the recent section off, but leave the dock on. The recent section takes up a lot of extra screen UI space. Between 3-finger swiping on the trackpad or swiping at the bottom to jump between stages, and even dragging and dropping apps from the dock and Spotlight, I just don't see the need for the recent strip to always be on the screen. It's a nice feature, but revealing it when I need it is perfectly fine. This video is sponsored by PDF Expert. PDF Expert is one of my favorite apps. I used to use it every single day back in my IT days. It's a full-featured PDF markup and file management application. It's free to download and to try out, and honestly, some of its best features are completely free. This includes annotating and marking up PDF documents, like adding text fields, highlighting text, or striking out text. You can also store different file formats in the app, like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, images, videos, and of course, PDFs. If you decide to pay for PDF Expert, you can get features like editing text and images that are already a part of a PDF. Also organizing PDF pages, customizing your favorite toolbar, encrypt and add a password to your documents, filling in information and signing documents, convert PDFs to other formats like Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, and a reading mode for when you have those long documents and you need to read and eye strain starts to set in. PDF Expert recently got an update with iOS 16. There are new lock screen widgets, and these are great for if you want to quickly pull up a folder of travel documents or a big project you're working on. The other feature it got was live text for image and video. This is great if you're a student and you're recording a presentation. You can then just copy the text out of a video or image and paste it into your notes. That's really cool. And the third feature is tied alongside iPadOS 16, and that's Stage Manager support. PDF Expert is free to download, and I encourage everyone to do so. If you decide PDF Expert is for you, there are two plans to give you the advanced features. $49.99 yearly for the iPhone and iPad, or $79.99 yearly for the iPhone, iPad, and Mac app, which gives you additional functionality like OCRing, which is only available in the Mac app, and priority support to a super responsive customer service team. I will put a link in the description below to where you can go and download PDF Expert. My thanks to PDF Expert for sponsoring this video. There are a few keyboard shortcuts available for managing stages. You can see a list of these by holding down the globe key. The first is globe back quote. This lets you cycle through apps that are in your current stage. Kind of like Command Tab, but it won't take you out of your current stage. Next is globe left or right arrow. This is another way to jump through your recent stages. Left goes back, right goes forward. Globe up arrow will show all of your recent apps. Globe down arrow will show all of the windows open for your active app. Globe control up arrow moves all of your apps in your current stage to the side and lets you pick a new app to add to that stage. Command M will minimize the active window of an app out of your current stage and into a new one. Command W closes the current active window of an app. There are some interesting effects of using Stage Manager. First, there is now full camera access when multitasking, so you don't have to worry about any weirdness like the camera pausing when you're in a video call and you're wanting to use another app. You can have another 3 apps open alongside it and be working in those. iPhone apps are now usable on the iPad. This means you can have iPhone apps as smaller windows in Stage Manager. So Apple basically made the Instagram iPad app that Instagram refuses to make. When dragging and dropping files, you have to pause before dropping. If you don't pause, whatever it is you were dragging will just go away. I honestly don't understand the purpose of this. I've been using the beta for 4 months now at this point, and I still let go too quickly and lose what I was dragging all the time. When in Stage Manager, your wallpaper is blurred. I hate this. I use photos I've taken and carefully edited to make sure they look good as wallpapers. I wouldn't mind this being an option, but you can't turn this blur effect off at all. Having any size window means your background is blurred. When using Stage Manager, I create groups of apps to create certain workspaces. For example, I use a couple of craft windows and dark noise or indel for my writing space. Reader, Pens, and Spring are my reading and research space. Messages and Discord are my messaging space. Things, Fantastical, and Craft are project management. One thing I have asked for in the past for split view is a way to pin certain apps into slide over. The iPad is a big canvas to work on, but a lot of those apps couldn't take full advantage of that space. Now with Stage Manager, you can have these smaller windows for these apps. So apps like messaging, 2FA, Twitter clients, music apps, calculators, weather apps, and so many more get a huge improvement because they're not taking up a huge amount of space on your iPad. I can have these apps in smaller sizes while also being able to do other stuff like have a notes app and my task manager in a big window. When you move an app around in a stage, the OS will automatically shift other background apps. This can get really annoying. The amount of time I've spent managing windows is way too high. I want to be able to position windows where I want and not have them automatically shift around because I opened something else. When using Stage Manager, you really need a globe key on your hardware keyboard. But outside of Apple keyboards, this is a very rare key. But what you can do is go into Settings, General, Keyboard, Hardware keyboard, modifier keys. Here you can swap out modifier keys for other options. I changed Caps Lock, the most useless key, for the globe key. But there is an annoying bug in iPadOS 16 currently. If you are using a USB keyboard and make this change, then unplug the keyboard when you're done with it, but then plug it back in when you're ready to work again, it will reset that modifier key. Hopefully this bug gets fixed soon. I'm excited to see Stage Manager on the iPad. It shows Apple is still willing to try weird new things on the iPad. Overall, I like the concept of Stage Manager, but its execution leaves a lot to be desired. My hope is Stage Manager keeps getting worked on over the life of iPadOS 16, and we don't have to wait until iPadOS 17 to get feature improvements. What I don't like about the state of iPad multitasking is it's too confusing. There are now multiple methods of multitasking on some modern iPads. There are way too many options for multitasking on a device that is supposed to be very intuitive. The methods that are here are often too confusing for even some advanced users. What needs to happen here is one method has to win out. If it's split view, then we need more advanced grid-like controls and the ability to display more than 2 apps at a time. If it's Stage Manager, then it needs freely adjustable window sizes and positions. Also, by default, add apps to the current stage instead of opening them in a new space. There also needs to be a developer API so that developers can define window sizes of their apps by default. When I cold open something like a calculator in Stage Manager, it shouldn't take up the majority of a display. It's a guarantee when I open any app in Stage Manager, I will have to resize it in some way. On top of all of that, Stage Manager is still very buggy. Those issues need to get solved quickly. Either way, there is still work to do on iPad multitasking 7 years after it was originally introduced in iOS 9. One feature that has been pulled until a later date is external monitor support. This will still be a feature that requires the M series iPad chips though. It's a bummer that this was pulled as it was super useful, but buggy, but hopefully it'll be back soon. For now, it's back to the pillar boxing method. I'll make a full video about external monitor support when it does ship. When using Stage Manager, one of the best new features to enable is display scaling. This increases the resolution of the display, allowing more content to be shown on the screen. This looks like stuff is smaller on the display, but really it's just an increase in resolution. This is a feature for the M series iPads and the 11-inch 2018 and 2020 iPad Pros. This is not on the 2018 or 2020 12.9-inch iPad Pros. To enable this feature, go into Settings, Display and Brightness, tap on View, and select More Space. Here is the 12.9-inch iPad Pro displaying multiple apps in Stage Manager with display scaling off. Now here is the 12.9-inch iPad Pro displaying multiple apps in Stage Manager with display scaling on. I was surprised just how much more I was able to put on the iPad's display with this feature on. Display scaling is a must enable if you plan on using Stage Manager. The extra space it gives you is so important to the windowing method. It's a real shame the older 12.9-inch iPad Pros aren't getting it. If you don't plan on using Stage Manager, still give display scaling a go. The extra space in the classic split view is nice. Once I enabled display scaling on my iPad Pro at the start of the beta cycle, I only turned it off for testing. For me, I will take the increase of resolution and space to display stuff over having UI items be bigger. Virtual memory swap is the next big feature. This feature is exclusive to the M series iPad Pros and the 256GB M1 iPad Air. This is not a feature for older iPads or the 64GB M1 iPad Air. Virtual memory swap allows the iPad to use extra free storage space as temporary RAM. This way, apps can stay open in the background longer. This also enabled the ability for apps to now use up to 16 gigs of RAM apiece if they support the extra memory entitlement. So even if you have an iPad that doesn't have 16 gigs of physical RAM, it can use extra storage when needed to fill in that gap. This means pro apps like LumaFusion and Lightroom can have access to more system resources. This is a huge step towards getting more professional and creative apps on the iPad. I've heard from developers in the past that the biggest issue for this was RAM limitations. I'm also hoping this means we are closer to seeing Apple's Pro apps come to the iPad. Reference mode is for people that need color-accurate workflows. This is just for the M-Series 12.9-inch iPad Pro. What this does is it turns down the contrast of the display, so it makes it more color accurate, but it looks a little more washed out. This is important to graphic designers, artists, photographers, video editors, and more. This isn't something you'll want to leave on all the time because it takes away that special look Apple displays have. It's really for niche workflows. You can turn it on in settings, display and brightness, and toggle reference mode. This is something I used every once in a while during the beta period when I edited photos. It's too big of a hassle to go in and turn on and then remember to turn off. I wish there was an easier way to toggle it. I was hoping to see a shortcut action added so that I can use automation triggers to turn it on and off when I open and close certain apps. From this point forward, all features mentioned will be coming to all iPads that support iPadOS 16. A big feature of iPadOS this year is bringing Mac desktop class features to the iPad. There is a whole bunch of features in this list that I'll mention throughout this video. The first desktop class feature I want to mention though is Driver Kit. This came to the Mac a few years ago. This was a way for hardware manufacturers to develop drivers. This means the iPad will be able to support hardware that needs hardware drivers, like Thunderbolt audio interfaces. I haven't been able to test any of these yet, but I'm excited to see what comes out after the official launch. Next is a proper right-click menu. In previous versions of iPadOS, if you right-clicked or two-finger clicked on something like a word, it would give you the old-school pop-up menu. Now if you two-finger click on something, you get a proper right-click menu with all the options. In the edit menu, you'll see options like cut, copy, and paste, replace if a word's misspelled, look up for definitions of words, translate, search web for, web searches of what you have selected, and then a share sheet option. The cool thing about this edit menu is it changes based on context. If you select an address, you'll have the option to get directions in maps. There will also be an option for currency, measurement, and temperature conversions. If you select a time or date, you can create a calendar event or reminder. There's also an option to show you that date and time in your calendar. Third-party developers will be able to make their own options for the edit menu in their apps as well. What's interesting about this is in tablet mode, you can still get the older pop-up method. I find that odd because the new edit menu is so much better even in tablet mode. Another two-finger click option is secondary clicking in blank areas. So for example, in Calendar, this will give you the option to create a calendar event. It will pre-fill the date and time with wherever you clicked at. This is a feature I hope to see a lot of third parties adopt. Band selection is the next feature. This is the ability to use hardware modifier keys to select a range of items, like files and stuff inside apps. So for example, you can command click multiple files or items to select multiple objects. You can use this to open, delete, edit, whatever. You can also select an item, then hold down the Shift key and select another item. This will select everything in that range. In tablet mode, you've been able to do two-finger drag to select multiple items for a while now. Spotlight got a few interesting upgrades. First, there are new quick actions. This is stuff for like timers. You can go into Spotlight by swiping down on the home screen or hitting Command Space on the keyboard anywhere in the OS. Then you can type Start Timer. This will run a built-in shortcut. You'll get a time picker to select the timer's time. I wish Apple would have taken this just a step further and let you type Start a 10-minute timer and then skip the time picker altogether. Another quick action is for turning on and off focus. Type turn on or off, then the focus name. If you tie this into some shortcuts automations, there's a lot you can do with this. Shortcuts also run significantly faster from Spotlight now, which is always a welcome improvement. This is the way I trigger most of my shortcuts on the iPad. Spotlight can now do image searches from messages, notes, and files on top of the already existing Photos app search. This works just like searching in the Photos app. It indexes your photos on device using machine learning so you can search for subjects like dog or mountain. When searching for businesses, locations, or sports, there are now richer results. This will show locations, times, or scores. Spotlight is such an integrated part of how we use any Apple computer. I love to see that it gets updates like these. Focus was one of my favorite features from last year, and this year it got some great improvements. When configuring a focus, you can now set up apps and contacts in an allowed or disallowed list. Before, you would have to go in and allow every app or contact you wanted to send you a notification to you while you were in that focus. Now you can just go in and block certain apps and contacts. This will let everything else through. Another key feature is focus filters. This allows you to configure the contents that is displayed in certain apps and widgets when a focus is enabled. There are a few built-in system filters. The first is the ability to toggle light mode or dark mode. The next is toggling low power mode. Then there are the app filters. For Safari, you can toggle tab groups. I use this for my filming mode and pulling up my demo tabs. Then there is calendars. You can use this for turning on or off certain calendars. So if you have a weekend focus, you can set this to turn off your work calendars. Messages will allow you to filter out threads from contacts that aren't allowed to send you messages in that focus, though any favorited threads will still be available. Mail allows you to turn off certain accounts. Again, if you have a weekend focus, you could do this to turn off your work email. Third parties will be able to make focus filters. For example, Fantastical already allows you to pick from calendar sets to display. Drafts lets you preload workspaces and action lists. It even lets you pin certain drafts. With live text, you can now select text from video. This works just like how text selection in images worked last year. Highlight, then copy or use lookup. There's also quick actions for doing currency, measurement, and temperature conversions. You should see a line under these. Once you tap on them, you'll see all the conversion options. This should save a lot of people from having to do Google searches. Collaboration is a new feature in which users will be able to share a document they are working on with others. This way, multiple people will be able to work on the same document at the same time, similar to the way Google Docs works. You set this up from the share sheet. You can pick between send copy or collaborate. Pick collaborate in order to do collaboration, and then send the document off to the people you want to work with. Once you've started collaborating, everyone in collaboration will be able to make changes to the document. This works with Pages, Safari, Notes, Numbers, and Keynote, along with third-party apps that support it. If you work with a group of people, this can be a great way of sharing a document and tab groups with people. Let's go over some app updates in iPadOS 16, starting with the Files app. Files finally got the ability to change file extensions. Just rename the file and change the extension to whatever it is you want it to be. If you don't see extensions for some reason, go into the View options and enable them. I am ridiculously glad this is here now. The lack of this feature caused some issues for me back in my IT days. The next feature, and this is another finally, is the ability to view the size of a folder. Two-finger click or long press and select Get Info. You'll now see stats for this folder, including its size. You'll also notice at the top there's a folder name and a down arrow next to it. You can tap on this and get a few options, including navigating to the parent folders, renaming, copy, move, and get info options. This is a handy way of managing folders. In List View, you can now tap on the name or date columns to sort by them, which is really nice. You can also tap on them a second time to reverse the order. One feature I would like to see changed is Preview in Files. When selecting a file, you can hit the spacebar to see a preview of the file. Nothing new there. But with Stage Manager, it opens in the Files window you are using. I would like to see the preview shift to using the Center Window feature. This way it would get a new window, but it would be properly sized. Safari is next up. Tab groups now have the ability to be shared with multiple people with collaboration. After sharing a tab group, any new tabs or pages opened will sync across all who have access to that group. This is great if you are working on a project with multiple people, planning a trip, or just, building a Christmas list. Speaking of tab groups, they can now have their own custom start pages separate from the one of your main Safari group. This way, if you want to theme them, you can. Pen tabs are back in Safari. These were removed with last year's redesign. Now you can long press on a tab and select Pen tab. This will move that pen tab to the front of all other tabs. Pen tabs are also available in tab groups. Extensions now sync between devices. This is a very nice touch. So you only have to enable them on one device now, and their state will sync across all your other devices. I found before this I was enabling some extensions on some devices, but not all, mostly because I forgot. The last Safari change I want to mention is a settings change. Go into Settings, Safari, and enable Show Links on Hover. When hovering over a link, you'll now see the URL that it resolves to in the bottom left corner. The next app is Mail. In Mail, you can now schedule messages to send later. When composing the message, long press on the Send button. You can then pick from a couple of predefined times or set a custom time. The obvious asterisk of this is your device must be powered on in order for the message to be sent at that time. The next feature is Undo Send. After hitting send, there will be an option to undo that message being sent. By default, this will be available for 10 seconds. Basically, it just doesn't send the message for 10 seconds. It doesn't actually undo the sending of the email on the server side. You can go into Settings, Mail, Undo Send Delay to change the time limit of this feature. When answering email, you may not be in a position to deal with a certain message. You can long press on that message and select Remind Me. There are a few predetermined times, and of course, you can pick a custom time. The message will then go away and come back at that set time. Search got dramatically improved in Mail. First, it's a lot faster now. I use Search for pulling up any archive pieces of mail, so this is a very welcome update. The other update is Search will now correct for typos and use synonyms for the searched words. You can also search for attachment names as well. There is now support for rich links from URLs in Mail. Super nice, and it makes it for a more presentable message. The last feature is another desktop class feature and something you'll see across several first-party and third-party apps. This is a customizable toolbar. Select the More button and tap Customize Toolbar. From here, you can add or remove items from the toolbar by dragging and dropping. This is great so you can just have the stuff you want in the toolbar and in the position you want. You'll see this feature in places like Notes, Reminders, and other apps. Speaking of Notes, that's up next. First is enhancements to smart folder configurations. Previously, this was just using tags, but now there is a whole host of metadata options and rules to pick from. First, you can toggle the filters to match any or all of the criteria. The full list of the metadata filters are tags, created, edited, shared, mentions, checklist, attachments, folders, quick notes, and pinned notes. This makes Notes a very compelling option if you have a ton of different notes and you want to use filters to organize them. Notes can now be sorted by date created, date edited, or name. You can also reverse the order as well. In drawing areas in a note, you can now add text boxes for typed text. You can also insert shapes like arrows and boxes now. This is great if you're like me and can't draw a straight line. When handwriting text, you can have it automatically straighten out. This will make handwritten notes look so much cleaner. If you insert an image into a drawing area, you now have the ability to rotate it. In Quick Note, you can now attach a screenshot. Trigger Quick Note, then select the More button. There will be an option to attach a screenshot here. Once you select it, it will then take a screenshot to attach. This will not include the Quick Note window. Reminders is up next. The first feature is now you can pin lists to the top section. I created an inbox list and added it to mimic the feature of other task managers I really like. This way I have a default place to dump tasks that I can organize later. You can add a list to this section by selecting the More menu and then tapping on Edit List. This will allow you to move lists around using drag and drop. You can also turn off built-in lists if you like. I also created a smart list using filters that gets all of my tasks that don't have due dates. This is my someday task list, which I borrowed this idea from the app Things. These types of tasks that don't have due dates tend to slip through the cracks. This gives me a special view just for them. Speaking of smart lists, you can now filter by any or all in the metadata criteria for that list. This makes this feature so much more powerful because you can get really complex with its rules. There is now template support in Reminders. Build out a list and all of its tasks. Select the More button and choose Save as Template. When creating a new list now, you'll see an option for templates. From here, select the template you want. It will then prompt you for a name for that template list. You can even share these templates with other people if you wish. Groups of lists can now be selected. This will show all the tasks that are in those groups along with what list they are assigned to. This reminds me a lot of the Things area feature. Really nice feature to have in reminders. In the Today view, you'll now see a new morning, afternoon, and evening group. You can drop tasks into these groups to visually separate out your day. If you do add tasks to these groups, they automatically get assigned timed alerts. Personally, I just like to have a list of tasks I need to accomplish in a day, and I'll decide when I want to do each myself. But if you're somebody that likes breaking up your day, this could be really handy. In the notes field of a task, there is now rich text support. You can do the obvious stuff like bold and italicized text, but you can also make bulleted lists. In settings, reminders, you can now enable the ability for reminders to show the badges for tasks that are due today plus overdue. Previously, it was just overdue and that would bug me. I use badges as a big red warning sign for tasks I still need to complete for the day. I spoke about Facetime in my iOS 16 walkthrough, but one feature I didn't mention is handoff, mostly because it needed the other OS updates to be released. Now when you start a call on one device, we'll use the iPhone as our example here, you can walk over to your other device, the iPad for this instance, and you can then pass that call over to the iPad. This works really well and is handy for when you start a call away from your desk but want to move it to the computer that you're working from. This was a much smaller year for shortcuts compared to previous years. Honestly, I'm happy about that. Until now, there has been a major redesign of the app in some way every year. From using it over the beta period, it's my impression that they spent this time fixing bugs, which is very welcome. That being said, there is some new stuff in shortcuts. Like I talked about in my iOS 16 walkthrough, there are app shortcuts now. These are shortcuts made by app developers that allow you to start using their apps with shortcuts in Siri right away. No configuration needed. Other than that, the big changes are to the built-in actions. The first being Notes actions now support rich text. There's also a whole host of new Notes actions like deleting notes, pinning, changing notes settings, creating and deleting folders, moving notes, and a bunch for managing tags. Search files has also been updated to use the new search feature. Mail now has the ability to open a specific mailbox. There's also a new search mail action which could be really handy. Safari got a couple of actions for managing tab groups. There's actions for opening and creating tab groups. You can now also open a new tab and a private tab as well. There's also an action for finding tabs, which could be an interesting action to use if you keep a lot of tabs open or you want to jump to a specific pin tab. There are now options for opening the reading list and finding a specific item in your reading list. Combine that with the already existing add to reading list action and you can build your own read it later app right in shortcuts. There are a couple of new system actions as well. There are actions to configure the focus filter for specific apps. There is also a new Find Current Focus action. This could be really handy for scripting complex shortcuts. There is an optimized file size for PDF actions. This will compress any PDF you send to it. I would love to see this expanded to support other file types. Finally, there is a Remove Background action. This will take a photo, pull the subject from it, and delete the background. Perfect for a meme generator shortcut or if you don't want to use Photoshop. Messages got a lot of finally updates. After sending a message, you can now edit it. Long press on it and select edit. This option is only available for 15 minutes after sending the message. Next is undo send. We've all sent messages we probably shouldn't have. Now you can quickly delete them. The trick is to do it before anyone notices. You can now also mark a message thread as unread. Swipe right on a message and select the blue icon. This will mark that thread as unread. The weather app is now on the iPad. I don't want to hear anyone complain that the iPad can't be a real computer because it doesn't have a weather app anymore. Yes, those were real complaints I heard. It uses Apple's new weather API, which is basically dark sky. That's it for my iPadOS 16 walkthrough. My thanks to PDF Expert for sponsoring it. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite iPadOS 16 feature is. Thank you all so much for watching. Hit the like button if you liked the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and have a great day.